There in the end, we won't be silenced, and of course Tuesday the 31st of August, which is a call to stand right across both our nations at all three levels of government, that meaning the local council chamber. In Australia, that will be the state parliament house. In New Zealand, that will be the regional council, and in Australia it will be at the federal parliament. In New Zealand, that's called Central Parliament, the Beehive, in Wellington. And of course, the homes of the state governors in Australia. The homes of the Governor Generals. Both Australia and New Zealand. At some point, Anzac, we all have to search our souls from right and wrong. And if we know what is happening in both of our countries, then on Tuesday the 31st of August, we will stand in silence at those locations as a people united. Enough is enough. Our governments are abusive, and we are coming. Collectively, 30.5 million people, both sides of the ditch, standing there in silence together. Some pretty powerful shit right there. And together, we will indeed show the world how a country takes back its country peacefully. Yeah.
All right. Hope everyone enjoyed that. Welcome to the first episode. This is Shifting the Narrative. We've got Brendan McKenna and Wake Up Australia on today. So we pretty much just started this little platform to discuss many of the topics that are revolving around the freedom movement in Australia, more specifically in Melbourne, and just to discuss a few recent issues that we feel need to be addressed. So, yeah, I'll let you guys just go into that a bit more if you want.
Well, hello everyone, and thanks for creating this. When you first reached out to me months ago, the first thing that sort of brought me to your attention was you were talking to me about your fears of the false flag attack. Well, right there with what Karen Brewer's proposing and Andrew Morrisby and everyone else, that's a pretty good candidate for a false flag attack. And at the very least, it's going to be a key element to getting us classed domestic terrorists. So it's an opportune time to talk about, I guess, the concerns in this movement and flesh out the problems together. We've all been sort of chatting about it, and Wake Up Australia. He's been talking about it as well, and it's really great to, I guess, sort of come together finally.
Yeah, hey guys, how you going? Yeah, I guess I didn't even know you existed, Brendan, probably until must have been past October, maybe November coming up potentially. And sooner or later, our work started to intersect, and someone else actually accused me of being you. I'm like, what the fuck? Who's Brendan McKenna?
It happens to be.
Yeah. And it was really interesting just to fill in the gaps between what I was finding and then what you were finding. And I guess it all intersected with a lot of the Freedom Day movement, didn't it? And
it was.
On the other side of that was the big area of focus for me early doors was Avi Yemeni. So, and then to see it's all linked in together to some huge operation, which I think the long-term play looks like it's going to be reenacting another, insurgency like the Capitol Hill, like we just saw in your video. So,
yeah, and a great video too that really highlights a good comparison for people to sort of really understand how things aren't really kind of all what that they seem, and even if it is just a bunch of bunch of misguided fools at Capitol Hill. It certainly worked to the government's advantage in relation to passing new laws and legislations, and that same thing's happening in Australia. So the question is who's behind it intentionally, and who can possibly be rehabilitated to understand that we really need a moderate message to succeed in lobbying the government and getting the majority on side.
Yeah, and I think just adding on to that, I think a lot of people they're just very caught up in this whole freedom sort of movement. They're not really, the whole idea of domestic terrorism or extremism has just sort of gone over their head, and they're not really thinking that to the silent majority that this will look like pretty much a terrorist threat. So I thought it was important that I'd put that video together and just sort of give my perspective on the whole situation, just to help people avoid walking into what looks like some kind of government trap very identical to the Capitol Hill riots.
Well, it's interesting. You mentioned that it often goes over people's heads, and that's one of the things that Wake Up is often talking to me about, that, you know, the research just goes over so many people's heads because it's such a complex mechanism at play. And we don't need to be talking about conspiracies and the New World Order to explain that complex mechanism. And Wake Up, your research on Palantir and you know, the predictive policing system models is one of the big concerns that I'd always had in relation to bringing out a social credit system and what this health passport sort of entails, which is coercive methods to make us feel that, you know, we should be getting this vaccine as quickly as possible.
Yeah, it's amazing how many ties of comes back to Palantir. Of course, Palantir coming from a CIA program, which then interesting is how many places we could go to from here, because you might know Mary Jane Liddycoat from Freedom Day, which is a massive rabbit hole in itself. But I believe on top, the mountain of evidence we've got of her past being involved with DFAT, which is involved in the Australian Secret Intelligence Services. But of course, she's out of it by now, you know. I believe who took over her role, Brendan, was actually someone who's involved in Palantir. What did you find there?
When she was, because she was with DFAT, which is an umbrella, or at least was before they reorganized the intelligence community. ASIS and ASIO that they reported through to. And so she was working in the Korean embassy, and I'm not saying that she's a spy, I'm just saying that there is a few patterns here. And so let's speak about these patterns. So when she was working as a counselor, a secretary, she was looking after the Department of Education, Science and Training for some of that time as well. And when she left the Korean embassy under this DFAT umbrella, that she's a career public servant. She's not a politician. She is pro-government. It's not so much pro-party, it's public servant. She's a Canberra person. At least that's what her ideologies used to be. I'm not saying 100% that that's what they still are. But it was taken over by someone, and I can't remember the name of his top. Do you remember Wake Up?
No, but as you talk, I'll probably find it. Yeah.
Yeah. He took over the role of secretary in DFAT in the Korean embassy, where Mary Jane Liddycoat was. And just recently, he left DFAT after being a career public servant, exactly like Mary Jane Liddycoat. And he took on a 6-month contract over in England for Palantir. And Palantir is the one that's bringing out all the health passports. And where are we seeing this taking place the most draconian measures? In Israel. And he has just been appointed the Israeli embassy. So he's heading up the embassy there. He's the foreign ambassador to Israel. So these guys, it's a career role. And whether they stay in politics or they become chief inflammatory officer, like the information we found out, Wake Up, in regards to someone else that she worked closely with.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, if you haven't seen any information on Mary Jane, I mean, I think that's probably an hour and a half in itself. But obviously, if you don't know her name's Mary Jane Liddicoat. She popped up in Freedom Day running behind the scenes Mick Sims. If you look at her history, she's from the DFAT, which resides within the Australian Secret Intelligence Services. But interesting enough, aside from that, she's also part of what is being branded a cult, which is called Access Consciousness. She's actually a certified bars practitioner, which specifically targets children, which is crazy as it sounds. It actually gets into manipulating minds and what some call mind control. And as Mary Jane likes to call it, as she said herself, that Canberra is heavily MK Ultra town. She said that in an actual video in one of the Freedom Day live streams, which was quite interesting. But yeah, her history is unbelievable, especially if you start looking into her time over in Korea, to her book that she wrote with a United Nations agent whose role was to effectively use propaganda to disarm nations. And the book they wrote together was a Syrian language book, as they both spent time in Syria.
Arabic.
Yeah, Arabic, right?
So can I just
jump in, Brendan?
Sorry, go.
Yep. No, go
just
ahead.
when we say they're a spy or that they're in a cult,
No,
that's
this
just
is
theories.
yeah, that's right.
That's just theories. It's just how we sort of speak in relation to our own personal beliefs, which are quite fluid. They change from time to time. I just wanted to put that in there, just so we.
Yeah, I mean, she's actually left, so I'm talking about her previous role. I'm just saying, like, if you, she was also an author of the AusAid. AusAid's actually linked to same as USAID, which is normally linked to a bunch of NGOs and spying, I guess. But this is previous roles, and I said, who knows what she's doing now? She did run a bar in Canberra, which I think she's still got going. But yeah, we'll put more information up on that. But when you tie into Palantir and systems, a lot of it's about, look, they came up for a lot of people might not have heard of Palantir, but they were used in the US to track COVID-19 vaccines. So the man behind Palantir, we'll just touch a little bit, is Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel originally funded, one of many, was behind, I can't remember the amount of money, but behind Trump's first campaign. So it's about AI.
Facebook.
Yeah, that's right. And it's not hard to see that Facebook's actually a CIA operation, in my opinion.
You go to those links. Then you go to those links with Palantir and Cambridge Analytica. So he went from Facebook to running Palantir, and obviously that was that big debacle with Cambridge Analytica and taking people's data and what they were doing with it.
That was the whole point of Facebook, wasn't it?
Yep. Of course, Palantir is going to be the one who's tracking our COVID-19 vaccine. So which ties into, we can start getting into Jane Holton from there and into Volt and ASIO once again. But yeah, Palantir seems to be involved in many aspects of a few intersecting people in the protest movement. Also getting into Peter Thiel's a big proponent of cryptocurrencies. And his company, which I believe, in my opinion, that Peter Thiel may be linked to Melbourne Freedom Rally, which is Hamish. Is it Hamish? Yeah. Harrison McLean. So, I mean, I don't know if we want to go there just yet, but Palantir is definitely a major player here.
Yeah, they definitely are. And just going back to some of Mary Jane Liddicoat's roles, when you were mentioning the Syrian Arabic connection. So we've had a lot of people from Western countries go over to the Middle East and fight since the first Gulf War back in 91. So for someone to bring out a course to learn Syrian, Arabic and colloquial Arabic, which I believe is the type of dialect spoken by a lot of the foreign fighters, ISIS and stuff, but I can't confirm that. It's quite interesting just for that to be there, as well as just being a little cover. And well, as for Pollitt, she actually sold Pollitt but Pollard Bar, the bar that she ran. But you were the first one that said to me that it's a honey trap. And yeah, you kind of look at that and you go, well, what else could it be, really? When you got someone that runs a bar where people get drunk, and it is got a lot of sexual innuendo in this bar, and it's, you know, a short stroll from Parliament House, and we know about, well, publicly we know about the orgies that are taking place. We were discussing this the other night about the orgies in the meditation room in Parliament House. So, you know, a lot of debauchery goes on down in Canberra, and to run a bar that's
yes, well, the Alice in Wonderland party, was it? That was a nice little theme, that one. And the photo you found, I thought was quite interesting. You know, I'm sure it means nothing, but where she tagged I Spy. Obviously, you know, there's the articles talking about how her role was actually to wine and dine foreign dignitaries when they come over.
That's right.
So yeah, work out what you want from there. But at some stage we'll put all this together. I did have a massive thread on this on Twitter, but I've been kicked off there, which was always going to happen.
So essentially what you're saying is that it appears that this bar she owns is more of a way to lure people in for possibly like blackmail purposes and other things like that.
I wouldn't say she's doing that, but if someone wanted to, geez, would be the perfect way to do it, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I'm just saying it appears that could be a possibility.
Right. Yeah, and I guess where we're really going, where this is going to tie into what we want to talk about today, is Karen Brewer getting into this protest. What's the date? What date is she doing this?
So it's the 31st of August. Karen Brewer is planning to host pretty much in both countries, New Zealand and Australia. She plans to host protests in every state to basically take control of certain government buildings.
Right. So it's not very hard to see. Sorry, it's not very hard to see the link between Karen Brewer and Mary Jane.
No.
So once we, if you can, you just type that into Google if you like, and go have a look how many times Karen Brewer's popped up on her page. And then, of course, this will tie into the Australian Patriots role, where they will grab all your details. Brendan?
Yeah, 100%. It's just a tiny little circle that Mary Jane Littlecote's been sort of operating, and they sort of both promote each other. And Aussie Patriots role, Freedom Day, Stand in the Park, is sort of where you can sort of see that little hub take place, and the characters in relation to a few of them are pretty obvious as well. The 31st of August, for me, the biggest concern is that they say that they're going to enter all council chambers, local, state, national, Parliament House, Australia, New Zealand, and not leave until
their demands are
until
met.
Basically, demands are met, and the demands are for all politicians to step down and for them to release the suppression order papers, which is misinformation in itself in relation to how that's presented, but we'll talk about that shortly. But it's basically an act of war, a call for action, foreign national. So on that note, I implore and I urge ACES and ASIO to act. It's pretty clear that if you don't act, it's pretty obvious too, and I know for a fact that you're aware of it, that if nothing takes place, well then potentially people can just call it another operation because it was let to simmer and let to go. And if we don't find out that people like Brady Gunn and Andrew Morrisby and Karen Brewer have been hauled in for questioning and gag ordered to stop talking about this rubbish, well then what is it? Possibly an operation. I don't know. That's just a thought.
It's not hard
to
a crime. Yeah. Well, what happened after the Capitol Hill is, what actually happened, was straight after it, there was calls for domestic terrorism laws to be revived in the States. Remember after 9/11, of course, we got the Patriot Act, but there's been new laws being put on the table, and that came out directly after it, as they always do. And now, just recently, it's been bipartisan support emerges for the new domestic terror bill. And I haven't gone into whatever rights they're taking away, what civil liberties the states are losing, but they need to do it here because the domestic terror and ASIO narrative has been in play. they all happened across the Five Eyes countries basically at the same time. And this is look, to push into whatever new system's coming, we all need to be on the same page. And to slowly bring in laws that are going to strip all our rights, that has to happen fast, a lot faster than naturally it would. And this will we're just following suit. And this is the way of doing it. Because to the mums and dads, if you show people breaking into Parliament House here and New Zealand and God knows where else, they'll just go, we have to be safe. So done, job done. Thank you,
They'll
Karen.
just accept it straight away.
Yeah, and the problem is that, yes, there are pedophile rings, but the just like the ITNJ, I believe it's actually there to protect the very same thing that they're pretending to be fighting. And it's real hard to follow is that this ties into Fiona Barnett. And a lot of people, if you bring this up to go, hey, maybe it's not all true what she's saying, they somehow think that you're not believing in these pedophile networks, which is actually not the case. There's a bigger play at hand, and ITNJ is a big part in that. And I know Brendan, you've done a lot of research into this.
Yeah, and there's a lot of research out there. There's a really document that someone released from America. So if you type Fiona Barnett hoax into Google, you'll be able to read this PDF document. And I encourage everyone to do so, and sort of it gives you an understanding of how long-term operations play out. And like you said, definitely pedophile rings exist, and they exist in institutions. They exist in private and government, and have existed at least. So to clarify, but the way that people like Fiona Barnett and Karen Brewer and Rachel Bourne, they present their message, it's done to silence and ridicule real victims from really speaking out. And if you look at someone like Fiona Barnett and her many outrageous claims, not outrageous from potentially happening, but all happening to her, is that you can see that they're possibly gatekeepers, siphoning real people and real victims. And well, who would you go to if you were a real victim of something so heinous and horrible as this? You would go to these gatekeepers, and then what are they doing? They're just silencing them, in my opinion.
It just seems like a big discrediting campaign, so that whenever these issues, because we're not saying there isn't corruption and there isn't actual pedophile rings going on, but the way that they're being presented by these movements is sort of an aim to allow people just to disregard the whole thing. Whenever they hear the topic, they're just going to instantly think, yeah, that's a bunch of tinfoil hat information. Like, we're not going to listen to that. When there is truth behind it, but they're using half-truths to discredit the whole conversation. At least that's how I sort of see it.
And yeah, I agree completely. And another disinformation tactic that they're using is that they're using part truths for everyone to come across like they're anti-Semitic, and people quite quickly getting radicalized in this movement. So these laws, there is some need for these laws, and I think even the change of the tone to politically motivated ideologies, and religious motivated ideologies as being the two things that ASIO will be targeting on, instead of the far right and foreign extremists, etc. Although it's good to be able to branch out and really sort of enforce these laws on a wider community, it's also quite concerning, because you can see the far right and you can see these gatekeepers all really ramping up, and at the same time there's people speaking their little truths out there, and they could get wrapped up in this and be classed domestic terrorists just from sharing some posts. And that goes back into Palantir and how a lot of this data is being siphoned through these social media platforms and private groups and chats that we all have, and meetings that we all have, like Stand in the Park.
Yeah, the Stand in the Park, that was originally set up by Brady Gunn, is that right?
Yeah, that's right, mate. So Brady Gunn, if you listen to...
Sorry, go for it.
Yeah. No, sorry, I'm on my rant at the moment. Brady Gunn, if you listen to this, reply to the missed call, reply to the message. You need to speak out against Karen Brewer. You can't be letting her use your platform that you created to be doing this. Otherwise, we lead back into well, the concerns that we've already raised about you. You know, you're still playing the narrative. Change course, change direction.
Yeah. It's interesting. I don't know a lot about Brady Gunn, but a quick little look. I did notice that there was an article saying how he spent a bit of time in Afghanistan when he won some money when he was younger. So I don't know.
Yeah, right.
If you won some money, would you
I
go to
never
Afghanistan?
No,
Is that-
that's like Brenton Tarrant sort of situation, and well, it's true. And also he was also on Home and Away, I believe, and he was a presenter for Nova FM. So, you know, make of that as you will.
That's the
Yeah.
thing.
Well, yep. Once again, up there with Mary Jane every time. So
Yeah, and
Does
he
look
popped up with
like,
his one man. Yeah, sorry, go mate.
yeah, certainly does look like a long-term play that's been set up, and in my opinion, and look, once we get this video out on Mary Jane, you're guilty by association, in my opinion. That if you can see that and then go, no, there's nothing. I mean, I shown Serene. How do you mention? What's Serene's last name? Defawa? How do you mention her name?
Tefaha or something, yeah.
Yeah. I've shown Serene the mountains of evidence on after I seen her praising Mary Jane actually, and then I contacted her on a private Telegram page, and she jumped on my Twitter page, and then I said okay, and then she looked at it and said, "Nah, there's nothing going on here."
Yeah, it's all up to standard, is it?
Yeah, I'm like, and she's a lawyer. I'm like, come on, mate. So yeah, how deep does this go? People we've all put faith into, you know.
Yeah.
It's a bitter pill to swallow, to be honest. But luckily, we can actually see what's coming, and what we can do is get this message out of who these people really are, their connections, and they can't. If enough people know about this plan, I mean, it's going to be harder for them to enact these new laws that's probably going to be coming for just accessing anything at any time of the day, which I'm sure they can anyway, but legally, which they could use in a court, I'd imagine. So no doubt they'll be going for encryption laws, I think.
Goes back to the old saying of know your enemy. And if you know your enemy, you're at least able to change course and camouflage yourself, or retreat in a certain way that you know, keeps yourself intact. And this is a message for the genuine, I guess, truth seekers out there, is the term that gets used these days, is you know, is to heed this message that we're all putting forward.
And probably just to add on to that, I understand it can be hard for people who've been sucked into this whole narrative to let go of it all and realize that many of your idols may not be who they really say they are. Coming from personal experience, being caught up in it all, and then further understanding what these movements are about, then yeah, I can personally say it is difficult to let all that go. But if you really want change and you really want solutions, then I'd suggest looking into some of the topics that we're talking about and changing course on this whole narrative, because if people do go ahead with events like this that Karen Brewer is suggesting, then it's only going to allow us to walk straight into the trap and strip us of the freedoms that we still have.
Yeah, and we're not saying do nothing. Not at all, because it's the first thing is education, to know what's real, who's really on our side. The main players that you're seeing aren't actually, unfortunately. But the key to this whole fraud, and we're not there yet, we don't have vaccine passports in Australia yet. So it is possible to maybe between us, and we can kick all these other people out, that a little movement of peaceful protesting, something can be done to try and get ahead of the curve of this new security state that we're getting pushed into. And I know, Brennan, you've got some ideas there.
Yeah, definitely. And it's just a matter of watching them flesh out and just empowering other people to stand up and and to speak out as well. And we're starting to see that. We're starting to see little movements and different ideas starting to organically grow. And just in relation to looking up some subjects that Thought Crimes mentioned is look up some terms like astroturf movements, look into controlled operations and psychological warfare, and see that they exist and see that they get run by multiple agencies. And it's well-known fact now that 40% of ASIO's budget goes into this movement. But what about ASIS? What about ONA, the Office of National Assessment? What about IWD, Information Warfare Division? And what about private entities, operations potentially, like Sasha Stone and ITNJ? So, you know, there's a lot of eyes on this movement. And yeah, as Wake Up mentioned, in relation regarding Five Eyes, they're a real big concern. Five Eyes, they keep us safe, but they also keep a very close eye on us. And we're the only Five Eyes country that don't have far-right extremist organizations listed up until recently. We've got a foreign one listed, but wait till they start hitting up the domestic movement. And who is this domestic movement? Well, I believe that's common law. I believe that's anti-vaccination. And yeah, we just have to be wary, but it doesn't mean we have to be fearful like many of us were in 2020.
Chris?
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out where to go from there.
Yeah.
Sorry, mate.
Oh yeah. So yeah, what you were saying about like the Five Eyes thing, that's something I wanted to point out actually, was that these influences that we're seeing in Melbourne and all over Australia, it's not just this country. Like this is happening throughout America. Like you've got people like Alex Jones, you've got David Icke in the UK, you've got like Rebel News in Canada and also RV in Australia. But yeah, you've got these different influences that seem to all be pushing the same narratives, same messages, all selling their own products and crowdfunding. And they're, yeah, who knows whether they're officially working for the same people or whatnot, but it really does seem like they're all pushing the same sort of scams throughout all the West.
Yeah, and Wake Up's done some good research into Mercer and Tommy Robinson. Take it away.
Yeah, this is where we start getting into, which I believe could be behind the whole COVID pandemic, is you start getting into intelligence agencies. And this is where you'll start finding intersections between MI5, Mossad, CIA over and over again. Same with ASIO, who's got no actual committee in Australia that even looks at what they actually do. It looks closely, it's really ran from the UK actually. But if you start looking into Tommy Robinson, there's so much evidence to say that he's actually connected to MI5 operation, which ties into a Mossad operation. Look, and then if you want to go further from there, you start looking in the funders of that, and once again, that's come through a lot of the players in, say, Pompeo and CIA, which is the National Endowment for Democracy. So a lot of the misinformation campaign that you'll see, look, I'm not saying China's a good guy at all. Fuck, they're going to be our peacekeepers who are going to come into Australia potentially, you know, so don't take this the wrong way.
Yeah, if we strip our parliament.
Yeah, well, there is actually a real...
That's the message to Booth calling Tommy lefties.
Yeah, well, there is actually a legit disinformation campaign that's getting funded by the National Endowment of Democracy, right?
Yeah.
You would have seen Abiy Yemeni in Hong Kong as part of the riots there. He was part of the funding from NED, which is, you can probably tie into Rebel. But NED is also behind, so it's basically a CIA operation, but you can find the same funding behind Sanjeev Sablock, because he works for the Times of India, which is funded by NED. So they got a active. So if you look at the people who are funding NED, it's the same people funding ASPI in Australia, which is the Australian Strategic Policy Institute, which, funny enough, has got Jane Holton on the board, of course, which is the main player between SEPI, Gavi, and the Australian government. So she's like the buffer.
And Christina Kegley, who keeps pushing the terrorist threat in the mainstream media.
Yeah. So what's happening is they're pushing a disinformation campaign to a degree on China in regards to the Uyghur and the Islam. They're trying to say there's a genocide going on over there. But you mind you, what always gives these people
Falun Gong as well.
What's that? Sorry.
And Falun Gong as well.
Yes,
and
that's
Falun
right.
Gong as well.
Yeah, well, and you can look at them being behind the Epoch Times. The giveaway for all these guys are, especially someone like Sanjeev or Abiy Yemeni, they'll go on about the Uyghurs as if they care about Islamic people. They're the same ones. It's embarrassing, actually. If you actually look closely at Sanjeev, because these guys need to the threat, the CIA, built up Islam as a threat, and they're funding these organizations to actually set up like a Cold War 2.0 type setup. So Raytheon is a big funder of this, and what happens is we paint China as an enemy. The money keeps rolling into the military-industrial complex, and that's just one part of it. But also the other part of it, of course, is trying to slow down the economy and things like the BRI, Belt Road Initiative,
and that also links into, you mentioned Raytheon, and Raytheon are linked in with Ricardo Bossi, and then you mentioned Tommy Robinson, and you look at Morgan Jonas pushing the CCP narrative as well as Ricardo Bossi. He got up on stage in Brisbane and pushed the narrative.
That's right. This is an Australian government propaganda. So these guys, in my opinion, are nothing but agents, right? Look, Ricardo Bossi's taken it down now because I've put so much light on it, but he had an organisation where he's part of called Lionheart. And if you have a look at that, it's just a bunch of, just a military-industrial complex, So, geez, Boss is another one. He's an absolute massive liar. Sorry?
He worked in the head office of the Army for strategic future warfare planning. I believe I got that right, but I could be a little bit wrong. And what is that about? Future warfare planning. He's also worked in the Middle East in a lot of these different things, heading up different private contractors as well as working for the government. And then he's been a public speaker with Tony Abbott and Craig Kelly and all of these guys only a few years ago, as well as speaking at a True Blue crew rally. So what the fuck is going on here, guys? You can see
how true is the True Blue crew? I wonder. Yeah.
If people haven't figured out yet, there's a lot of connections. Like everything is connected.
And we just need to put some videos together there to make it to actually really blow your mind. But a lot of people don't realise that who Morgan Jonas really is. And then one of the big smoking guns is you just have to look at that video from 2018 where he justifies shooting Palestinians while Avi circles around his new protege.
defends shooting Palestinian children, pretty much.
Yes.
And anyone that sort of crosses the border into Israel, they're agitators.
That's right.
That's all.
And I'll tell you now, you're sticking up for the Israeli government. They got the green pass, mate. That's coming. That's if they could pull that off here, they would. But they know it's a little bit harder.
I'll get there.
You got Avi going over and serving for the IDF, and I'm not 100% on this, but isn't he raised in Australia? So didn't he go?
No, he is. Oh no, he's born in Australia. He's one of 17 siblings.
Yeah, and he fucking, instead of serving for the ADF or bringing his skill sets of the elite Israeli Defense Force back to the Australian, what does he do? He just monetizes.
It's a common thread with these guys too. They get back and they open gyms, So you've got Morgan Jonas, he owns a gym as well. You've got Avi with the IDF gym. Yeah, you think that his allegiance is to Australia? No, no, and that's why you won't see any massive amounts of work going into the vaccine passport or the green pass from these guys, because
fuck him. He's taken a couple of hundred, or he's taken more than a couple $100,000, and fucking where does it go to? It goes to Rebel News. And what's Rebel News? They're a Canadian company, and so we should see if the fucking money is even going to an Australian bank account, and if it's in Rebel News' name, and who. I reckon it's not even held by it.
You don't know.
It's bullshit.
Yeah. Well, once again, if you look at the head of what's
Sorry.
his name? Ezra Levant. He's from Big Oil. You know, he's coming back to Ricardo Bossi. Is the same deal. He worked for the Saudi oil oligarchs there. But I mean, do people even understand about Abi's and his fake case? I mean, he got over 100, and God knows if it's more. I mean, we don't know, but officially on the page it says he got $112,000 for the Supreme Court case. But what lawyer did he get? He got Kathleen Foley, the same lawyer that represented Daniel Andrews. They
Wow,
represented
I didn't know
Daniel
that.
Andrews in the hotel quarantine case, right? Mind you, just while we're at it, that report, the person overlooking the hotel quarantine was bloody Jane Holton, who is she's on the board of Crown Casinos, but Crown owns a bunch of the hotels in the fucking quarantine case, including 2 in Victoria, right? But back to Abby, out of all the lawyers, right? Like Kathleen Foley, the one who appointed, it's madness. Kathleen Foley, who...
Well, she went to Event 201. That's how most people know her.
Oh, Jane Holton. That's Jane Holton, yeah. Oh, she's our, yeah. But how is this about Kathleen Foley, right? So she represents Dan Andrews, but then it goes and represents Tony Pecora. I get information that she's actually through the case. No shit, right? So the cases are now there. They're representing themselves. So kiss your fucking money goodbye. Has Abby told anyone? No. And the weird thing about Kathleen Foley too, right, is in November, she popped up on Four Corners, and she was the one who brought Christian Porter to the forefront of people's minds. So she said that Christian Porter was a misogynist, and she went to school with him in the back in uni days, and he was a pig. He probably was, who knows? But it's interesting that she was the one who she seems like another little government agent lawyer. Because then all of a sudden, 2 months later, the rape case comes out with Christian Porter. You know, it seems to be all these attacks on the liberal side of it, with the sex stuff. It's very odd. I don't know, but yeah, Kathleen Foley. If you're going to take on the government, you'd hire fucking Dan Andrews' lawyer to take on Dan Andrews, wouldn't you?
That's unbelievable. I didn't even know that.
Yeah, man. Yeah.
Well,
no one
we have
saw
someone
it.
that can potentially explain this in a lot more depth. Don't we wake up?
Yeah, and you know what? There's so much information here, and maybe this chap's just a little bit of an idea of some of the connections. You know, we're just rattling off the top of our head, but we can put this together in a way that will probably blow your mind.
Yeah, in the future, we'll get a bit more of a structure for these little shows that we're going to try to do every single week. This is obviously just a test to see how it goes, and yeah, hopefully we'll be able to do them live and have a bit more material that we can screen share so people can sort of follow along. Because I understand there's a lot of different connections and names of companies, names of people that we're trying to connect the dots of, and most of these influencers haven't even mentioned any of these companies' names or any of these sort of things. So I'm sure a lot of it's gone over people's heads. No, it's just a lot of it's gone into a whole bunch of stupid shit, and it's almost going into infotainment. You know, it's more. It's like a sitcom in some ways. So yeah. These relationships.
Look, I think one of the major videos we'll just do is we'll show not Jane Hunton. We'll show Mary Jane's history, and then from there, it really branches off really well, because I can tell you now, this is the big mistake they made. I can't believe they let her in.
Yeah,
and I've shown Mick Sims this too, by the way, and Mick will just no, she helps with the IT. Oh, really? Yeah, that's who I'd want be helping with the IT as well. No way. Anyway.
Well, Mary Jane Picote says on camera that she first got involved in knowing that the government was corrupt because of the pedophile suppression orders, and then she turns up at a protest in April, and then by May she's, running Canberra for Freedom Day, and it sort of goes on from there. And even with the one that's coming out next month, the Millions March Against Mandatory Vaccinations, as well as Aussie Patriots Roll and a Stand in the Park, and she's got her fingers all through that, being an administrator, connecting all the dots for people. It's
imagine spending 30 years of your life with the Australian government to then be taken on the Australian Patriots role, which is building an army to take on the government.
Yeah,
mate, they wouldn't allow this. This wouldn't. She wouldn't be walking
in Lake Burley Griffin. No, she wouldn't be allowed to.
Man, she would be taken out.
And if she was genuine, how many people can she lobby for us for our concerns, instead of just doing this crap behind the scenes and reposting and sharing a bunch of stuff that could be considered radical? Why isn't she lobbying all of these public servants that she knows? She's publicly photographed with 4 prime ministers. So come on.
No. Oh, but anyway, thankfully, it's really good for us because we know it, right? And we're not there yet. We don't have a green pass set up here as yet. We know that they're going to try and bring in some crazy laws to really fuck us over. And it's going to be, the key is going to be this operation that Karen Brewer's going to be part of. And you know what, Chris, you can make unbelievable videos. We can get this out, and we've actually got time. So
yeah, plenty of time. They gave us a couple months, so
yeah, thanks for that. Yeah. They actually didn't, they were so cocky with this whole thing.
Yeah, I couldn't believe that video she put out, just explaining it, the way she worded it, and like she's so smart that she's gonna conduct a mass fucking takeover of the government. Like, it's just insane.
Oh. You know what? You'd think that you and me would still be having a live platform if we were saying that? Mate, no chance.
No. The cops would have been at my door the next fucking...
And I think this is a good time to do a call out to all of the online influencers and organisers of this country who have in one way or another supported Karen Brewer, or perhaps they've featured on a live with her. Call this shit out. This is the downfall of this movement. Wake Up's mentioning about putting all of this stuff together in a way that's coherent, but I don't even think that we need to anymore, but although we should in order to plant seeds. But most of the online influencers of this movement have now validated this argument that we've been putting forward for months by either Task Force Lotus and freaking out about that, or talking about everyone being shills or psyops. So, it's time we all start speaking out about some of the obvious operations that are at play, or at least foolhardy missions. Speak out about Karen Brewer.
By this point,
Seriously.
Everyone's aware of it. So, if people wanna try and redeem themselves and have an open discussion about it, feel free to come on this show and we'll talk about it.
Yeah, definitely. We'll super nice as well.
Yeah, and remember though, the argument's going to be, but she's exposing this. Okay, look, there's some truth in probably what she's saying, but if you actually pay close attention, seems to be every private school's a fucking pedophile network.
Yeah.
There's so much mud slung around. It gets too messy. It gets away.
We've been wrong before.
Yeah.
And we'll be wrong again. But yeah, at least have the open discussion. Talk about the concerns. And if you don't believe a word that we're saying, come on and speak about that as well. Because, yeah, as Wake Up saying, not every school or not every politician, they're not pedos or pedo protectors. A lot of the people are just trying to make a living and get through life like we are. So
there is actually good people out there. Everyone, this is what I was trying to describe to people in Instagram, Facebook, is that it may seem like it, but not everyone is out to get you. There are good people on every political side and in the government, civilian, whatever. Like not everyone is trying to rape your kids, like that's the sort of the message that's being pushed, and it's not true. Like, yeah, there's corruption and all kinds of bad things going on, but have a bit of balance in your perspective, because most likely most likely a lot of these narratives are are being abused to push certain extreme events to happen.
Yeah.
Don't fall for the fear trap.
Yeah.
You know,
For yourselves.
what they want. Psychological trauma, and people like Lizzie Rose, and I'll never stop talking about this until she addresses it. She said that she video recorded dead, dying, charred children remains under Melbourne tunnels. The people that would have listened to that, that are just getting into this sort of way of thinking, you know, they could have really got led down some bad paths. And that's a fast track to wanting to overthrow the government, which is what we see every day with an Andrew Morrisby live. So, yeah, continue, gents.
Yeah, well, that's it. Because when you talk about kids, it's all of us. It's at the core of everything we're against. But when you throw so much fucking shit around, what it actually does, it muddies the waters from legitimate cases. And I won't get into it now, but I've shown you, Brendan, what I found before, and I wholeheartedly believe I did find a pedophile network, right? But
Yeah,
I'll tell you who's not talking about that one. Karen Brewer. Is because, yeah, and look, and I'll be honest with you, this is going to sound stupid. I'm going to start to sound like I'm going into Karen Brewer, but just have a look who, on the very same day of event 201, the very same day, just have a look who Scott Morrison met with, Wayne Kushan. I won't get into it too much here because it's another story, but my point is there are legitimate honey traps happening across, and Epstein is the one who that case has brought that to light. That's a real thing. But if you keep throwing shit around everywhere, it gets too messy and no one's going to listen to you. It just goes, oh, yeah, here they go again. And that's what I think is tying into this 90-year suppression order. Actually, I don't think there is a 90-year suppression order. I think Heffernan's an absolute liar, but all of a sudden we have to agree on this one thing. Do I believe that there's prime ministers with shady past and politicians? Fuck yeah. But I believe this is actually going to be covering up for something else and obviously tying into this huge operation. Yeah. I mean, that's probably as much as I can say today.
Well, it all sort of started during the biggest child abuse case in history, which was around Stanny Schools, which is a school in Bathurst, a private school. And then around there is when Fiona Barnett sort of came out. And then you have a look at Bill Heffernan standing there with Fiona Barnett. Now Karen Brewer on Q is taking over the Fiona Barnett message after. We'll get into that at a later point. But yeah, you can see the links there quite clearly. And in my opinion, they're just gatekeepers. They're a lot of people, if they're experiencing these problems, you know, they're going to reach out to Karen Brewer. And is she talking about them? No, you know, like you're saying, wake up.
Yeah, it's take control of the narrative, you know. It's very hard for people to understand, but that's been tried and tested for such a long time. It's like, hang on, that person must be on our side because they're calling out this or that. So yeah, unfortunately, they learned that one a long time ago.
If you speak out against this as well, it's you know, I'm sure we've all experienced it. You get a lot of backlash because, oh, are you a pedo protector yourself? You know, do you believe that this doesn't exist, etc.? Well, of course it exists. Doesn't mean that we have to believe Karen Brewer.
Yeah, that's a good, yeah.
I mean, I think the first thing that got me onto Karen Brewer was the yellow. Wear yellow. Because that was a big stink with the Freedom Day thing. And
that goes
my understanding of yellow at the time is a bit different to what you've probably worked out. But I thought it tied into Avi Yemeni and his political party, that he first tried to pretend he was aligned with the Yellow Vest Alliance, which was not actually anything to do with the real Yellow Vests, but he.
Well, sorry, mate. The Yellow Vest started up actually in the Freedom Day movement with Brady Gunn and Standing in the Park. So, and he still often wears a yellow vest now, I believe. So, who knows? Yeah. He could be part of the old Reclaim Bunch, Liberty Alliance crew.
It works. I mean, it works just for optics as well. But the yellow vest was the thing that got me. Was I know that got co-opted in Hong Kong by the paid protesters. That was a legitimate cause that's took away from where the other best started in France. And I'm like, oh no, they're starting it up here, you know.
Mm.
And then she started pushing that one, and I'm like, hang on, what the fuck's happening here? And she'd go over to a little board and go, now make sure you wear yellow. And of course, that was when Serene popped up on that weekend and started calling for blood, as a lawyer does, you know.
Definitely not trying to sway people at all. Definitely not.
Yeah, well, rolls people up, because all we need is one nut to go completely crazy here, and that's just more ammunition for whatever law they're going to bring in.
Well, she said it was taken out of context, but no one else really sort of took it that way. And as you mentioned, being a lawyer, they're pretty smart with their phrasing, aren't they? Their terminologies and their words. So,
what about
streets?
Yeah, what about some of the emails you sent through? Lock, stock, and two smoking barrels. Guns are loaded.
What?
I mean, there's a whole bunch of keywords in things like that that Serene was sending out.
Yeah,
I'm like,
triggering.
Yeah,
it's trigger words to people's emotions and think that she's like a martyr. You know, you can even see it now. Oh, I'm a whistleblower. I'm in a safe house, etc., etc. It's, you know, I'm not saying you're not genuine, Serene, but hey, look, Wake Up mentioned this to me on the phone just the other day. Is you should be doing all you can to be calling out people to be getting refunds. You know, your firm's been taken over by an administrator, and that money is going to get sucked up. So people should be doing that refund process that we created, and they should be getting as much money as they can. And I urge everyone that's listening to this that's a paid class action member is to send an email to info@advocateme.com.au and put in the title heading refund. And, you know, she's already approved a couple, and she said she's going to do it. So let's hold that to account, because as you can see right now, these class actions aren't going anywhere.
If you've got a government administrating and picking where the case is going to take on the government, you think they're going to allow them to be taken down? It's no way, man. Not a chance. And it's just the same idea of how they took over the Avi Yemeni case, you know. And that, you know, I don't give a shit what you think about Avi. He's motivated by money and not helping Australia. So most likely, in my opinion, what's happened there is you keep the money, we take the case. What's happened with Serene, I don't know. But at the end of the day, no matter how you feel, you should get that money back, because those lawyers are going to... This is a globalist firm. If you have a look, it's huge. It's a huge firm, and that money's going to disappear in 3 seconds. And I'm really upset because, you know, I was such a staunch believer in...
Yeah, so was I.
I really thought the PDF that she made was good. I was desperate because my mum's in an old age home, and just really disappointed. But is what it is. And, you know, Serene, if you're listening, please tell people to get your fucking money out, because you know where that money's going. What's going to happen? You're going to come back in 6 months, because you're only lose your license for 6 months. So what's going to happen is she's just going to be another martyr and getting set up for the next grift. And everyone's going to go, now we keep them, you know, keep it going. And then what's going to happen?
I'm not sure if we... Sorry, I was going to say, I'm not sure if we discussed it on the live or not, if it was just before when we were talking, but did you want to explain a bit about what's happened with that law firm taking over her firm? Not sure if we actually discussed that already.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a lot of information other than I can tell you who it is, and you can put it up on the screen if you like. I'll just get it up here. You might want to edit this out. Hang on.
Yeah, I can always put things up on the screen later, so...
Yeah.
We'll put up some links and stuff as well. But the main point is her license has been cancelled. She's put in she hasn't even put them in, but she's announced 5-6 class actions, and only one sort of had the paperwork go through. And yeah, it's time people get their money back. I've spoken to a number of people in different financial positions that, regardless of it, it's almost principle now that, you know, it's gone on long enough, and it's time to hand back all that cash, Serene.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, if you're not comfortable contacting Serene, you can also contact the guys who have taken over. And I'll get that name up in a second.
That's something that Serene should be encouraging anyway, in order to workload.
Yep.
I'm sure they wouldn't mind a few emails from disgruntled or even happy customers.
Of course, I can't find it now.
That's all good. We'll find it eventually, and I'll put it up on the screen for people. But
Yeah. Yep.
I know. I feel like we've covered most of the things we were going to be trying to cover today. Unless there was anything else you guys that you wanted to discuss.
Look, I guess it's really just a brief overview today of. I mean, if you're new to this, that's a lot of information to go. What the fuck? Like, really? Like, no one wants to be lied to, man. And it's actually like, we talk about cognitive dissonance in, say, with normies and things like that. But no, this exists for all of us, actually, because we've put a lot of hope and time and into these people, and you feel like we all want a hero and feel like they're going to help us, and to hear name after name of the big players going, what, it's actually confronting. And I just ask you to, you know what, stick with us, and we'll show you some things that we weren't cheering when we found it, you know. Yeah.
And we weren't just talking about problems as well. I like to think we'll be talking to people that have solutions as well, that we believe are either genuine or, it doesn't matter what we believe. We'll be talking about solutions. We won't just be divisive and polarizing, because
and that's key. That's actually key.
So much of that.
Yeah, it's not a full black pill and we've got no hope. It's not that at all, actually. It's actually, you have the ability now to know that, okay, we're being manipulated, but fuck, it's great.
Yeah,
you can actually see. A lot of the time, a year ago I spoke to so many people who didn't even know what a psyop was. Think about what you've learned this year, and same. It's like, holy shit, okay, we've been cruising through life for such a long time thinking everything was kosher, not realizing the extent of the manipulation, how they ambush us on all sides.
Yeah, if there's one thing anyone can take away from this, it's that everyone's on a journey of growth through this whole process, and just because you're wrong at one point, it's not a bad thing. Like, you're still learning, you learned that you're wrong, and you can move forward with new information now, and that's going to happen every so often, like every few months, every couple of years, you're going to be a whole new person. So don't feel bad about being wrong about a lot of the claims you've probably been making for the past 12 months, because we're all just learning, and yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
you're not alone. None of us have been right 100% of the time. Some of us far from it. So, yeah.
Yeah, no way. Yeah, so thanks
Good chat, guys.
Chris. It's awesome, man. Thank you. And
No worries.
Brennan.
Cheers for coming on. Just before we end up, I'm just gonna leave you all with your weekly white pill, because I feel everything's been very, very black pilling, and a bit of positivity never hurt anyone. So this week, my weekly white pill will be make your bed in the morning, because it might sound like a simple, pointless task, but the theory behind this is basically to tackle the micro anxieties before you target the bigger macro anxieties. So if you set a good standard for yourself in the morning by making your bed or cleaning your room, things like that, then it will make the larger tasks you have to tackle a lot easier. So you're welcome.
Awesome.
Anyone else?
I'll say find some balance between researching and real life as well. Spirit and self. Just try and get connected and take time off your phone and your devices, especially if you're deep in the Facebook world, because that's the gulags. That's where a lot of this crazy stuff is down.
Digital concentration camps, yes.
Yeah. And you can throw this in just in regards to who's taken over the case for Serene. It's a company called Hall and Wilcox. So they're actually a huge firm with about 750 people, lawyers working for them. So from corporate sector to private clients, including Australian and international. So they're massive. They're not some small independent firm. Sorry?
Contact them. They're now
Yeah,
in
that's
charge of
right. So that's Hall and Wilcox. And if you wanted to read them, I can give you the number. And I will do that right now. No, I'll get you to put that up. I'll send you the link
that'll be
and then
on
just
the
put that
screen.
up. And yeah, give them a ring. It might be best to contact them first up so you know where you stand, because I'm pretty sure you're going to be try and talk you out of getting your money out. So I think you might have worth giving these guys a call first and then contact Serene. Their number is actually 9603 3555. Mention the Advocate Me lawyer case and just see where you do stand in terms of getting your money out, because it's worth contacting both sides, Serene side and this one, I'd say. So yeah, cool.
And contact Brady Gunn and Graham Jeffs as well. They're the two main platforms that Karen Brewer is using to push her agenda for the 31st of August. So let's put pressure on them in terms of if they support it or not. I know Brady Gunn says that he supports her personal truth, but does he support her using a Stand in the Park meetings to promote this? So Graham Jeffs and Brady Gunn, guys, come on, this can't go ahead. And I know you guys aren't stupid enough to think this is a good idea.
Well, there you go. You heard it here first. This was the first episode of Shifting the Narrative. And yeah, we'll be back again soon to talk about some more topics. All right. Cheers, guys.
See you.
Thanks, mate.